guys. Hello, everyone. Okay. Please don't forget to turn your cameras on as we start the class. All right, guys. So today and this week we're gonna be working on the we're gonna be working on this section. We're gonna start today and we'll have one more class to work on this. Please don't forget your cameras as I'm starting. And don't forget to turn them on. So the listening section is a multiple choice section. It's very similar to the reading section in the sense that you'll just have to, in this case, listen to some audio files and answer some questions based on the listening that you just heard. Okay, so you just listen to some audio files, could be any type, and then you'll answer some questions based on that. So specifically here in the listening, you could have 5 or 7 tasks. Okay, I'm gonna tell you why now. And these tasks, the things that you're gonna be listening to are gonna be either conversations or, well, both conversations and lectures. Okay, we'll see. So this is the structure. Now the listening and the reading sections are related somehow because you always have an extra task. So you can have this extra task either in the reading or sometimes in the listening. So this basically translates to the shorter that your reading is, the longer that your listening will be. So let's say that in the reading section, you have the short version. So in the reading section, you only have 3 passages. That means that in the listening, you will have the longer section. So you'll have 7 tasks. The extra task will be in the listening. But if on the other hand, in the reading, you have the long version, you have your extra task in the reading, then in the listening, you'll have something shorter. You won't have an extra task anymore. Okay, so basically, this is not even that important. What I want you to understand is that there is always going to be an extra task, either in the reading or in the listening. If you have the extra task in the reading, you won't have it in the listening anymore. But if you don't have it in the reading, then you will have it in the listening. Okay, that's what you need to know. And when I say extra, it means that it's not scored. So they won't really evaluate that specific task, but you don't know which one it is. So you just have to answer everything like all of them were scored because you really don't know. There's no way of knowing which one is the extra one. Okay, so you just have to answer everything. Now, out of these tasks, remember I was telling you you're gonna have to listen to both conversations and lectures. So to summarize, I'd say that you always have more lectures than conversations. That's what you need to remember. If you have 7 tasks, then 4 of them are gonna be lectures and 3 conversations. And if you have 5, then 3 lectures and 2 conversations. Okay, you always have one more lecture. Now, don't worry too much about this part. I think that this is not that important. We're gonna see how the conversations and the lectures work. And it doesn't really matter how many tasks you have because you have enough time to answer all of them. If you have more tasks, then you also have more time. It's not like you have to answer all of the tasks in the same time. Okay, so the time is according to the number of tasks you have. If you have 5 tasks, you have 41 minutes. And if you have 7, you get 57 minutes. Okay, so summarizing it, there's always an extra task either in the reading or listening. You have lectures and conversations, always more lectures than conversations. Don't worry too much about time. I don't think it's a problem here, but still you always have enough time to answer all of them. Okay. Any questions about this? I know it looks a little bit complicated. So Is this okay? Is this clear? Do you have any questions so far? No questions? Okay. So today we're going to be looking at the lectures part, and next class will focus only on the conversation. Honestly speaking, I don't think you're going to struggle a lot in the conversations. To me, I think that like to most students, that's the easiest part of the test. However, the lectures do have some more dense content, which is why they may be a bit harder, but it's still not rocket science. You'll be able to answer them just fine. Remember 3 or 4 lectures. These lectures last around 3 to 6 minutes, I'd say. And per lecture, you get 6 questions. So 6 questions per lecture. You have a set of 6 questions for every lecture that you have. Okay, we're gonna see this in more detail. Okay, moving on from this. Okay, so 3 or 4 lectures, 6 questions each. So first of all, before we start, does anyone know what a lecture is? We're talking about lectures, but what are lectures? Anyone knows? Yes, Oswald?
Hello, everyone. I think it might be when you're trying to say lecture is something that you just read and they ask you a few questions about what you read, and that's it. And you answer, this happened, that.
Okay, so that would be a good guess. And the thing is, the word lecture, by the way, doesn't translate as the word lectura in Spanish, which sounds very similar, right? So that's tricky. Lecture isn't actually a lectura in Spanish. So a lecture is actually not something that you read, but something that you attend to, something that you listen to, we could say. So in this case, we can define, to put it in simple words, a lecture is going to be a college class. Okay, so it's basically an academic college class that a student may attend to in their first, second year. Okay, so it's going to be a college class. There's going to be a teacher explaining a topic, but we're not going to call them teacher because when we're talking about college, we call them professors. Okay, so there's going to be a professor that's explaining the topic. Okay, so it's going to be a lecture, an academic lecture, which means basically a class in which a professor is going to be explaining a topic. Okay, that is what the lecture will be. So is that okay so far? Any questions about that?
I have one question, and how you say, how you define yourself? You will be a teacher or just a professor? Because I don't know if this is not college, but at the same time it's not school. So how will we call you?
Well, I call myself, I would say that I'm an instructor because I'm kind of teaching something specific, a specific skill preparation for this test. So I say I'm an instructor, but you can really call me however you prefer. Some people call me teacher just by my name. It's okay. So I'm okay with however you.
But can we call you teacher? It's not the correct use to say teacher or maybe professor.
Right, no. I mean, in English settings, when you're in school, you don't call your teacher, right? You call them by their last name. You say Miss de la Torre, let's say, or Mr. and whatever. So that's why you can really call me, by my name, Andrea, or just teacher, because I think it's like the tradition here in South America. But you can, as I was telling you, call me however you prefer. I really don't mind.
But it sounds great to instructor. It sounds great.
Yeah, I think instructor will be the more appropriate thing because that's what I'm doing. But yeah, as I was telling you, in order to call me, you can say anything you want. That's okay. So is that okay? Any questions now? Okay, so yeah, it's actually interesting because there's always a difference in not only in the, not everything is a direct translation, right? There's the culture that comes with the language. So, okay, now let's talk about how this lecture is gonna be. Now, this is the most important part, I'd say, to see. So let's talk about the structure of the lecture, how it's gonna be organized, okay? Now, in the beginning, during the first, let's say 15 to 30 seconds, you guys will have an introduction. So this lecture will have an introduction in which the professor is gonna be explaining what the topic is, and probably, and this is the most important part, the professor will give you some hints as to how the lecture is gonna be structured. So we're gonna see with an example how this is. So I have a few lectures in here. Let me open some. Maybe this one. Okay, so I'm gonna play this introduction for you. This is gonna be a lecture by a professor in the College of Fine Arts, okay? So I'm gonna play it. Listen to the first 30 seconds to see how it is.
Listen to part of a university lecture by a professor in the College of Fine Arts. Good morning, everyone. Today I want to start with a look at perspective, visual perspective. First, we'll look very briefly at the kinds of perspective, and then we'll look very quickly at its history in art. Just in case you don't know what we're discussing, perspective in art is the way that artists represent three-dimensional objects on the two dimensions of their canvas.
Okay, that was the introduction. First 32 seconds, sometimes it could be longer, but usually like that. So can anyone tell me what elements did we find in that introduction? What did we have? What did the professor say in that intro?
The professor states the object of the lecture.
Okay, great. The main topic, the main idea. So what is it in this case?
The perspective in arts.
Great. The perspective in art. Perspective. Okay. What else? What else did we have in the introduction? Anyone else?
The instructor, Andrea, I had bad internet and I didn't listen at all the how could you say in English, audio?
The audio. Okay, you didn't listen to it. Maybe I could play it again since it was only 30 seconds. But first, let's hear what Josue has to say. Yes, Josue?
I was going to say he was, but I don't know if you want to put first the audio, because he's going to know what I'm going to say. So is good? Is it good, or you prefer that I say it right now?
You can say it and then we'll listen again. Maybe we'll have a better idea.
He was talking about how this perspective that have, the artists about, doing, to put it into the, I don't know how to say it.
I think your connection is also a little bit weak. Is it just me? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, let me just change it. Let's just hear what, just put it again, the audio, and I will change my Wi-Fi connection.
Okay, so I'm gonna play it again.
Listen to part of a university lecture by a professor in the College of Fine Arts. Good morning, everyone. Today I want to start with a look at perspective, visual perspective. First, we'll look very briefly at the kinds of perspective, and then we'll look very quickly at its history in art. Just in case you don't know what we're discussing, perspective in art is the way that artists represent three-dimensional objects on the two dimensions of their canvas.
Okay. So we said the first thing that a professor mentions, apart from the greeting, right? The way that the professor's like, hello or good morning, everyone. So the first important thing is the topic, right? Which we already know, it's perspective, visual perspective. So what else? What else do we have? Okay, Len.
Yeah, the professor said too that we have to learn how to break the three-dimensional objects in two-dimension because they have to paint that, something like that.
Okay, yes, that's right too. The professor talks about a general idea of what perspective is, right? You had a definition as well. Definition of the topic. Okay, yes, that's true. Anything else that we found in that introduction? There's one more thing, one very important thing.
Well, I was going to say that there's a topic like of perspective, but the professor said that there's a perspective of how to see the world for a paint.
Okay, yeah. But without going too much as for the content itself, like the elements. What elements did we have in that introduction? We're saying the topic, definition. Yes, Josue?
Just talk about the canvas.
Okay, but that has to do with the definition, right?
Yeah, he was saying that he was trying to portray something that is in 3D, in three dimension, and how I say this, 3 dimension to two dimensions, and he was talking about the history of the artist, about how he put it in the canvas. So that's what I just understand.
Yes, that's right. I'm glad you mentioned history. That was also part of it. So yes, that's right. Now here's a transcript, okay? This is something that you won't be able to do in the actual test. You won't be able to read the transcript, okay? Not at all. But right now we can see it so that we understand better what we have. So in the beginning, we have the greeting, right? Good morning, everyone. That's not important. The first thing we had, and this is what Miguel said, right? He said we have the topic, the idea, the main idea, and that is perspective. So he has this intro, and the professor says, I want to start with a look at perspective, visual perspective. Now, the second thing, and this is what I was talking about, is the structure of the lecture. The professor kind of walks you through how the lecture is going to be structured. He says, first, we look briefly at the kinds of perspective, and then we'll look very quickly at its history in art. So that is what we were missing, okay? The structure of the lecture, how it's going to be organized. And this isn't always the case, but most of the majority of times, they give you those hints, how the lecture is going to be organized. So is it that you're looking at the kinds, the definitions of perspective, examples of perspective, the history of perspective. So I want you guys to please, when you're listening to that intro, try to understand that, try to catch how it's going to be a structure, what exactly you'll be seeing about the topic. Okay, so in this case, we have the kinds of perspective, which we could say means a classification, right? They're going to classify what perspective, or well, they're going to classify the types of perspective. And the second thing is the history. It's history in art, which is probably going to be like a historical note, right? So you know that you're going to be expecting sequence of events. So what happened first, what happened later, what happened at the end. For the classification, you're going to be looking at the types. How many types? I don't know, but you will have some types. Okay, that was the second thing, the structure. And finally, this is what you guys were telling me. We have also a definition, a brief explanation on what perspective means. So if you don't know what perspective is, in case you don't know, it is the way that artists represent three-dimensional objects onto the two-dimensional of their canvas. So those are the things we have, okay? We have the main idea, the topic, we have the structure, and we have maybe a definition, it's not always going to be a definition. Sometimes there you just have an example, a joke, a quote, an explanation, maybe some data even. So you may have different things, but something that will let you know what it's going to be about. Okay? So is that okay so far? What we have in the introduction? Usually the topic, hints for the structure, how it's going to be organized, and some sort of explanation. It could be a definition, it could be an example, anything else. Any questions about that? Is it okay? Okay, guys. Now, what happens later? And that's the interesting part. That's what we don't really know what to expect. So after the professor introduces the topic, you will have this topic broken down into different subtopics. So basically, perspective, for example, in the case that we just saw, you're going to be looking at the types of perspective and its history, right? So you'll probably see the two types, maybe some examples, and then some sequence of events for the history. But that's not always going to be the case, right? There are many types of organization. I can maybe give you some examples. So hang on. I'm going to show you some examples of it. So sometimes it's going to be classification. Sometimes it's going to be history. So sequence of events. Let's see what else it could be. I'm going to make this bigger. Okay. All right. So for example, these are some, not all of them, but some. Sometimes in the first one, we have compare and contrast. So sometimes the professor is going to compare and contrast two different things. So for instance, the professor may compare World War II versus World War I. So you're going to be expecting the similarities and the differences between the two of them. Sometimes you have advantages or disadvantages. So it's a still kind of compare and contrast. Sometimes you have definitions. So maybe the whole thing is about what defines perspective, maybe. Sometimes you just have steps of a process. So maybe if we're talking about a biological process, let's say the embryonic development, maybe you just have steps of a process, you know, like first thing, the development of the heart, second, the development of these organs, and third, and so on. So just have steps of a process. Sometimes very common, you have classifications, the one that we just looked at. So types of pollution, types of perspective, types of, let's say, cell phones, whatever. Okay. Sometimes you have theories. So let's say you have Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, and then they will provide you with different pieces of evidence supporting that theory. So if the professor is trying to prove something, some certain theory, then what they will do is provide you with evidence supporting it. So that may be another type. Advantages and disadvantages, kind of like compare and contrast. And another very common one is cause and effect. So maybe if we're talking about pollution, we can mention or list the causes or its causes, its effects, and there are many other types, but these are usually the ones that you can find the most. Okay, so I know that we don't really have that much time. You know, I wish we had more, but you can do this on your own. You can try to look for examples for each and try to maybe listen to some articles about a comparison, about the steps of a process, classification of something. Listen to some TED Talks if you want, or you can even read if you want, just to understand better how the structure of each one works. Okay, that's gonna help you, believe me, a lot. So is this okay so far, the types of organization that you can find? What do you think? Any questions, comments? Okay, guys. So let me show you another example, okay? Just the introduction. I'm gonna play this other lecture. They say a lecture from a science class. Let's see what it's about.
Listen to part of a lecture from a science class. Many people, including scientists, are confused about the distinction between nuts and seeds. Some dictionaries say a nut is also a seed. Others say a nut is a fruit. And still others say a nut can be both a fruit and a seed. How can an average person tell the difference? Well, in a nutshell, nuts are seeds, but seeds cannot be nuts. Clear as a bell, right?
Okay, that was a harder one, I know, because it wasn't so explicitly said as the first one we listened to, right? And you might have been a bit confused with the whole nuts and seeds thing. But what do you think it was about? First thing, the topic. What do you think it was about? Yes, Len?
Yeah. The topic was about the scientists trying to discover what is nut. Is it a seed or a fruit?
Okay, nut and seeds too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's it. That's the topic, basically, nuts and seeds. Now,
Yeah.
I know that the professor didn't explicitly say, okay, so here's how we're going to be organized, right? We're going to be looking at this and this and that. The professor didn't say that. But can you guess how the structure is going to be? Can you guess what we're going to be seeing?
Yes, it's a comparison way.
Yes,
Go away.
exactly. It's a comparison. So from the lecture, we can extract some, from the introduction, some hints that told us that it was a comparison, right? Let's read the transcript. So they were trying to say, okay, what is the difference between a nut and a seed? That was the problem. They say, many people, including scientists, are confused about the distinction between nuts and seeds. So you have that word, distinctions. Some dictionaries said a nut is also a seed, others say a nut is a fruit, and still, and so on, right? So how can an average person tell the difference? Well, in a nutshell, nuts are seeds, but seeds are not, cannot be nuts. So basically, even if the professor didn't exactly say, we're gonna be looking at the differences between nuts and seeds, you know that that is the structure, right? So you can be expecting, please guys, your microphones. So you can be expecting already what you're gonna be having, right? Probably if it's a comparison, then you're very likely gonna find the differences and the similarities. So you become an active listener once you understand how the structure is, because you know what to expect. You're gonna know what the information, the important information is. So the similarities and the differences. And I can guarantee that most of the questions are gonna be about that, the similarities and the differences, because that's the core of the lecture. Okay, so try to always understand that. In this case, what else? Did we have anything else in that intro?
I think that uh, we can take the phrases about a dictionary, maybe.
Okay, yes, sure. And we have some definitions, right? We have, okay, what for some people this is an ad, for some other people this is what an ad is. So yes, maybe that is important. I wouldn't say so. If you want my advice for the intro part, um, you know, don't try to take so many notes from the introduction. In the intro, just try to catch those elements, okay? Understand what the topic is, the structure, and if you have anything that you consider important, of course you can take notes, but most of the time you just have one question from the introduction, which is what the topic is, okay? It's usually that question, but sometimes you have something different. So anything you consider important can be in your notes. Generally, the topic is what will appear in your questions. So anything to say, any questions about that, about how to catch or understand the structure of the lecture from the introduction? Okay, guys. Now, before we look at the body of the lecture, these are some things that you need to keep in mind. Now, the first one is what we have regarding to time. So as for time goes, I know that this looks crazy and it looks like it's not a lot. You have about 35, almost half a minute to answer one question. So I know it doesn't sound like it's much or it's enough, but like from experience, I can tell you that I've had really few students who have struggled with time in the listening section. Okay, because you listen to the audio only once, you get them question by question, and either you remember the answer or you don't. Either you have it on your notes or you don't. There's nothing you can do. You cannot go back and listen again or think it, like a thousand times. It's not gonna help you remember. Either you know the answer or you don't. So you shouldn't spend too much time in each question. So honestly, you're gonna see when you practice, but I don't think you're gonna struggle with time, even if it looks like this is not enough. Okay, you'll see when you practice. Now, the one interesting thing that you need to keep in mind is that you have a lot of limitations here. What you can do is very limited. You're gonna get the questions one by one, which means that you can never get the questions all at once, and you get them after you have heard the audio file. That means you can answer the questions and listen to the recording at the same time. You need to first listen to the lecture or the conversation and then start with the first question, then move on to the second, the third, and so on. You get them one by one. And once you press next, you answer the first question. You press next, you can never go back. So there's no turning back. If you have moved on to the second question, forget about the first one. You can change the answer. You can do anything about it. You cannot jump around either. That means that you need to make sure that you answer the questions in order, first, second, third, because there's no way of like skipping the third question and going to the fifth one or something like that. That's something that you're actually allowed to do in the reading, but not here in the listening, okay? You can never jump around, nor can you review your answers. So if you want to review at the end, you can do it, unfortunately, okay? And one more thing is that you're literally unable to leave questions in blank. So if you don't know the answer to a question, you are forced to guess. That means that you can never leave it in blank, but that's a great thing, I would say, because there's no penalty for a wrong answer. It's exactly the same if you get it wrong, the same thing as if you don't answer the question. So you better take a guess. Maybe you get it right, maybe you don't, but at least you're doing something, right? So don't leave blank questions. You can physically do it, so you'll notice when you're in the listening section. You only listen once, no matter what happens. You can ask for listening to it one more time or anything. It's just one time, and that's it. Now, most of the questions that you're gonna have are gonna be about the specific details from the lecture, which means that your notes are really important, because most of the time you won't remember these details, right? It's not something that sticks with you in the same way. Like in the conversations, it's different. But here, you'll be asked about those specific details, things like definitions, names, events, and all those things. So you need to take notes, okay? Try not to, some people are like, well, I don't need to take notes. For the lecture, I would say that you do need to take notes. Maybe in the conversations you can, if you want, like skip that part, but here in the lectures, taking notes is gonna help you a lot. And finally, this lecture could be one with a single speaker. That means that the professor is the only one that's speaking, the professor is the only one that you will hear. Or in some cases, the students are also involved and they are participating in the lecture. They're asking questions, answering questions, sharing ideas, and so on. My advice, my tip for this point in here is make sure that you identify who says what. So let's say that the professor asks a question. What is a nut? And a student answers the question. When you write down your notes for the student's answer, make sure that you write down an S for student, and that you know that that's something that the student said, not that the professor said, because then it can be confusing, because you know that students are not always right. They could be right, but sometimes they're wrong too. So maybe that's gonna get confusing when you're answering the question. So identify who is saying what. Any questions here about the things that you're allowed and not allowed to do in the listening section? Yes, Josue?
I got a question. I was wondering if I go to the version institution like CA, right? Or the and they allow you to take paper from
Josue, I can't hear you well. I hear you like you're far away.
Oh, sorry. Just, I will get my.
Your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you better now.
Okay. What I was saying, if if I want to go to an institution like the CBA and I want to do this the TOEFL, am I allowed to take like a piece of paper or something to take notes, or how I do it? That's what I want to know.
Okay, so that's a great question, actually. So honestly, it's different in every test center. I recommend that you take some pieces of paper with you, but in some of them, they won't let you bring them with you. But they are supposed to, and they are obliged to give you pieces of paper if you ask for them. So I think they usually give you 1 or 2, but if you need more, then you can just raise your hand, talk to the proctor and or the evaluator and ask for paper, and they will give it to you. So bring a pen, and yes, you are definitely allowed to take notes. Like, that's the whole thing, especially in listening. You need to take notes, and not only in the listening, in every single section, every single time, you can always ask for paper and take notes. Okay, so it depends on the test center, but yes, you're supposed to take notes.
And I was thinking, and now that you're able to take the test in your home, in your PC, I mean, you can do it there too, because there's nobody, they're just going to use your webcam, right?
Yes, that's actually a great question. You're also able to take notes, but things work differently for the home edition. So you have 2 options if you want to take notes when you're taking the home edition test. You can either have a whiteboard, a board where you can write down with a marker and then erase what you wrote and then write down things again. Or if you don't want to do that and buy a whiteboard, what you can do is basically with any sort of paper, you need to buy these plastic sheet papers. I don't know if you know them. I'm gonna look for them so that you know what I mean. So basically these ones, okay? These are these plastic sheets that you need to buy, and you're gonna put your paper in that plastic sheet, and you write down your notes with a marker, an erasable marker, a water marker, so that you can, if you have just a piece of clothing, so that you can erase what you wrote and then write down other things again. So you have those 2 options. It's either a whiteboard or one of these, just a piece of paper or maybe something a little bit more consistent with a plastic sheet, so that you can write down your notes with a marker, a water marker. Okay.
Wow, I didn't know, because they may think that I will be cheating, right? Cheating. Yeah. I cannot use white paper. I guess not. I had to use one of these.
Yes. The thing is, but these are things that they tell you. So when you're registering for the test, you have a whole list of requirements, things that you need to meet, things like the room, what's behind you, so there's a whole thing. I'm not gonna lie. And believe it or not, in some cases, I've had students that have told me, like, I wasn't doing anything and they thought I was cheating and they suspended my test. So yes, you need to be real careful if you're gonna take the home edition one to meet all the requirements that they're asking for in terms of the computer, the device you're using and everything else. things like this, you know, how you're going to take your notes, but they will let you know. It's not that you have to know. They will give you a whole list of requirements and things to consider before taking a test so that you can be prepared.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, guys. Any other question? Okay, guys. So very quickly, before we waste too much time, on how to take your notes. Okay, I think that this is, I'm gonna like, about the specific notes, maybe we can talk about this next class too. Where is my part for taking notes? Okay, in general, just check notes on the most important information. Don't write down everything. Write down only keywords that you found from the text and use anything you want to help you. The important thing about your notes is that you understand them, that you can write them down easily, quickly, and that you get them, right? It doesn't have to be understandable for everyone. You can write down only consonants if you want, symbols, lines, arrows, whatever you want. Now, my advice, the best thing I can tell you for the note-taking strategy, you're gonna have a piece of paper like this, right? So something like this. I know that it's folded, but basically I want you guys to use your paper in this way, horizontal way. Okay, so you're gonna write down your notes like this, and you're gonna divide your piece of paper in 6. Okay, well, 6. So basically, if you can see, maybe here you look it better. I have folded my paper so that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes, right? Or 6 specific divisions in the paper. But you don't have to fold your paper. You can just, with a marker, write down some lines. I'm gonna do it right now. Like that. And I don't know if you noticed, but basically that's it. Maybe if I can share my screen. No. I'm gonna share the board. Okay, so I'm gonna draw how it looks like. So basically this is your piece of paper, right? It's in the horizontal position, and you need to draw, well, 3 lines. So you're gonna draw one here. Okay, what? That's not a line, sorry. So you're gonna draw one here, and one in the middle. And now your paper has 6 divisions or 6 boxes in which you're gonna be taking notes, okay? Now, why am I telling you this? The thing is, usually each lecture has a total of, remember I told you, right? It's broken down into different subtopics. So each lecture has about 6 subtopics, usually, or 5 or 6 subtopics. The important thing, the best strategy you can have here is understanding the structure and understanding the topics. So every single thing is going to be something different. For instance, in this one here that we were looking at perspective, if we look at the transcript, you'll notice that it's organized in paragraphs, right? It's not just one big thing, one single paragraph. You have the intro and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6 paragraphs, right? And well, 7 paragraphs. And each one is talking about one specific idea. It's a unity. It's talking about one specific thing that you need to make sure you understand. So for example, the first body paragraph talks about aerial perspective. That's the topic. It describes what it is. It gives you an example of aerial perspective, but its unity is aerial perspective. The second one is the other type, linear perspective. Then they talk about, I think, how it works, an object, the vanishing points, I think, I don't know. Then they talk, it's a conclusion for the types of perspectives, and then they move on to the history. So they mention the first big part of history, the second, and the third, right? This is about the Renaissance art, this is about the Western art, and this is about Italian artists. So every single paragraph that you won't see will talk about one specific idea. And your goal is to, in your 6 boxes, 6 divisions of the paper, you need to take notes. In one of them, you need to only write down your notes for one of the ideas. So this one here, for example, is going to be for aerial perspective, this one for linear perspective, This is for Western art, Italian art, and so on. Okay, so that's why I told you it's important to understand the structure from the beginning, and then your goal is to identify exactly when the professor makes a pause and transitions to a different idea. So let's listen to this part.
Represent three-dimensional objects on the 2 dimensions of their canvas. There are 2 basic sorts of visual perspective.
Okay, so that is a transition that the professor did. I don't know if you noticed, but the professor makes a pause, and the professor has usually a transition, like there are 2 basic sorts of visual perspective. So the professor lowers down the voice, makes a pause, and starts again with a different idea. Same thing is going to happen here. You have a transition, the other perspective, and so on. So you need to be able to catch those. You're going to get better as you practice. And when the professor changes or transitions to a different idea, you need to change to a different box. Okay? And why is this important? Because most of the time you have 6 questions. The first question is going to be for the intro, the second question, the first idea, the third question, the second, the fourth question, this, then they'll ask you about the next thing. They go in order, and you have at least 1 question per paragraph or per idea. So believe me, from experience, once you have everything organized, if you have something like, why does the professor mention Turner's landscapes? If you know that this is in your note, Turner's landscapes, and you know that it belongs to the first box, which is about aerial perspective, you will see in your options, you have things like 1, to illustrate aerial perspective, 2, to illustrate linear perspective, 3, to talk about the vanishing points. So just by knowing where it is, you can have an idea of what the answer could be, okay? Especially if you don't know the answer. So try to take notes in that way. Okay, guys? Is this clear before we look at an example? Is this okay?
Yes.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. So please get a piece of paper, try to divide it in 6, the way I told you to, and we're gonna be doing 1 practice. Don't worry if we don't practice that much. Tomorrow you'll be practicing with just 1. Okay, but for today we can do 1. So grab a piece of paper and a pen, and I'm gonna play the lecture. This is gonna be about facial recognition. It's here on the instructions. Listen to the lecture about facial recognition. Let's see. Okay, guys. So you ready? I'm gonna play. Okay.
Hello, class. So today we're going to be looking at facial recognition and to the different sorts of technology that go into facial recognition. Now, before we start, can any of you tell me where we can see facial recognition in action? Yes, you at the back?
In the TV show Las Vegas?
Well, you're right. In this popular TV show, the security team pull images of the individuals from their surveillance system and run the image through a database to identify the person. In that way, all the card counters and blacklisted gamblers can be escorted from the poker tables. It looks easy on TV, but in the real world, facial recognition is a tricky business. So let's start with the more traditional methods of facial recognition. Every face has peaks and valleys, and these can be translated into what is termed as nodal points. Each face has about 80 of these, and they include distance between the eyes, the length of the jaw, the width of the nose, things like that. These measurements can be used to create a numerical code, and this is called a face print. This system is good because it can compare 2-dimensional images such as photographs. The problem is that images have to be controlled. The person has to be staring straight at the camera. There must be no variance in facial expression or lighting because any variance in these parameters reduces the effectiveness of the system. So they had to come up with another way. So the new way of recognizing faces is by using a 3D model. It has better accuracy allegedly. 3D imagery detects distinctive features in the face such as the curves of the eyes, nose, and chin, features which do not change over time. These are measured at the sub-millimeter level. Interestingly, a 3D image can be taken not only from a live scan but also from a 2D photograph. And another good thing about the 3D system is that it can recognize a person from a range of angles. The person doesn't have to be directly facing the camera as in 2D technology. Once again, the system gives each individual a unique code, a set of numbers that represents the face. It's easy to match a 3D image to another 3D image if you already have a 3D image in your database. It's less easy to match 3D images to 2D images. But what they can do is pull certain measurements from the 3D image, such as the eye and so forth, and use this to convert the 3D image into a 2D image, and this image can be more easily compared to the 2D images in the database. But it's not just the measurements which can be used to recognize faces. There's also a new development called skin biometrics. This uses the uniqueness of skin texture to get its results. The process takes a picture of a patch of skin, and the system will then identify any pores, lines, moles, blemishes, and other features of skin texture. This method can be used to identify identical twins, something that cannot be done with the 3D technology. Its other advantages over 3D imagery are that it's insensitive to changes in expression, blinking, smiling, and so forth, and can compensate for changes in facial features, such as the growth of a beard or wearing glasses. It's not perfect, though, as it is sensitive to lighting conditions and poor camera resolution, and if there is glare from the sun. So, now we've covered the main types of facial recognition, we'll move on to its uses. Now, has anybody here...
Okay. So how was that lecture? What do you think? Len, yes?
Yeah, the topic was about technology advances about the facial recognition.
Okay, sure. Yes, you're right. I like that word that you used, advantages. I think they also mentioned some disadvantages. That's one way they organized it, but there's one more way. So what else do we see about facial recognition?
About a student talk about about the TV show of the 70s, I think, or
Yeah,
80s.
that's right. I was mentioning the introduction as an example, right, of where we see this facial recognition.
Uh-huh.
Okay, perfect. Anyone else wants to add something?
The professor implies three ways to how to facial recognition works.
Exactly, that's right. Yes, it's a classification type. We have 3 types, and then they mention advantages and disadvantages.
Yes.
Yes, Josue?
I don't want to talk much, but I write it down all the
I'm sorry, Josue, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I said for the activities out, so I can jump. Like I was saying, I write it down all the things that he mentioned in that audio, but I don't know if you want to hear because there is a lot of things that he talked about.
Okay, so yes, there's a lot of information usually, but yes, if you were able to identify those 3 subtopics, some of the advantages, some of the disadvantages of each one, then yes, I guess you guys are gonna be just fine. We're gonna see how the questions look and what we need to answer.
All right.
So the first question about the intro, it says, where does the TV show Las Vegas take place? So look at the options. What do you think?
I think it was in a casino.
Okay, let's see. That's right, in a casino. So you see, it's very quick. You know the answer, just select the one. Perfect, that's right. They talk about poker tables and so on. Now, second question, it's a definition. They say, what is a face print? So what would you choose? Leonardo, what do you think?
B.
B, distinctive curves in the face. You guys agree? You see
I think
distinctive
it's
curves?
A.
You think it's D, the number of nodal points? Okay.
No, A.
A, okay. All right, let's try B first. Okay, it's not B. Let's see if it's A. It is A. So definitions, remember, are always important. So I think D is kind of similar because the number of nodal points is translated into a code, and that code is the face print. But B and C, they have nothing to do with this. So yeah. Now question 3 says, identify 2 problems with 2D facial recognition. So look at your notes in the 2D facial recognition part and see if you have anything similar to what you have in here.
I think it's B and D.
B and D, okay. Milenka, what about you?
I think it's B and C.
B and C, okay. I think we can all agree with B, good. So Kevin, you tell me which the other one is.
Maybe the letter D.
D, okay, let's see. So no, it's not D. Does anyone want to guess? It's actually A. Not effective if a picture is dark. So I think you maybe like, that's why you need to be organized, right? Nodal points, that was for in the beginning. So face print is the number of nodal points translated into a code. And I think that we can measure it. I think that you had 80. So it's not a problem. The problem was the lighting conditions and that you have to be facing the camera. Okay, maybe they mentioned this, right? Maybe they mentioned facial curves and nodal points. You need to know, did they mention them as problems for 2D? And that's why you look at 2D and see if it's there. Now, what is the problem with the 3D technology this time? One problem.
The answer is the C. It's impossible to match a 3D image to a 2D image.
Okay. Anyone else? You agree? You see?
I would go with C2.
C2. Okay, let's see if it's C. Well, it's actually not. It wasn't C. I know that it's tricky because they talked about this a lot. But before, they mentioned something else. And the thing is, it's not impossible. Now, actually, there are many traps as well. This is one of them.
I remember they talk about identical twins too.
Okay.
But I don't know if it is the answer about this question or is about another topic about. It's of another.
I think you're right. It is that it cannot distinguish between twins.
All right, all right.
So you were right. Now, do you know, speaking of the traps, here's one. Sometimes if your answer choice has extreme language, something like it's impossible, it never happens, it can only happens once. So if you have this extreme language 100% of the times, always, never, I'm not telling you that's not going to be the one, but it's less likely to be the one because you need to make sure that that extreme language is actually true.
It's less
Okay, that's
possible.
something that. Yes, exactly. It's less possible. It's likely to be.
All right, all right.
So question 5 says, which two elements can be measured by the skin biometric technology? Two elements.
It's B.
Okay.
And C.
Anyone disagrees?
I think is wait, something the chin. Maybe could be A. Maybe.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, it's D.
D? Come on, you were right with your first one.
C.
Was C? Oh.
Follow your first instinct. Always follow your first instinct. It is C. You know, this one here, first thing, you know, not only with your notes and your memory, but also using logic, right? If you at least know what each one is about, you know that 2D is about measurements. So the 2D one was actually the distance between your eyes, the curve of your chin. So the 2D technology was all about the shape of your face, the measurements and everything. 3D is about angles, and the skin bio is about your skin. So it's gotta be texture and lines. But of course, you know, you need to use your notes and what you heard, not only just how it looks like, but in case you didn't know. So, and finally, the last one, which of these faces will the skin biometric system be unable to identify?
Wait, I think it could be B.
B, okay. Do you all agree?
I would say C.
C, okay. Look at the problems, right? So unable, that means that it's something that a shortcoming that the skin biometric system has.
A could be impossible to be unable to identify. Unable to identify. A.
A, right? Yes, A definitely.
Yeah, because I was thinking about to be able, no unable.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, unable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why they put it in capital letters, right? So that you know it's unable. Okay, guys. So yes, it's A because of the lighting. They mention it's sensible to light, I think, or lighting conditions. So that's why it's not A, but also from logic, if we know that it's about texture and lines, then which one is the only one that you're not able to appreciate the skin? That would be A. So I guess one thing, you know, not always here. Honestly, here it's more about like what you heard, your notes and everything else. In the conversations, a lot of questions are gonna be, and it's possible to answer them just by being reasonable. So in this test, always try to think things through if you don't know the answer. So you don't know the answer to 6, then think, okay, so what is the more possible, more likely to be the answer? If you don't know the answer, but if you know it, then just go ahead and choose. So do you guys have any questions now before we go? Any comments, questions before we go?
A comment about it. It's just about the last question. He talked about it, about the glare of the sun that affects. And I was just thinking, you know, this girl and she has the sun on her face, and I was just thinking it will be the correct answer. But these questions are tricky questions, you know. I would say that you got to really understand and hear what are they trying to say. You know, it's complicated, I would say.
It is, yeah. The lectures part is actually, yeah, it's somewhat complicated. The thing is that you have so many information, and my advice, in order to get better, just practice taking notes, practice listening to academic things like this, and taking notes and trying to understand also the structure and all. And one thing that I always say about taking notes, first try to understand and then you take notes. So you know, okay, it's in a casino, and then you take notes. Because if you're just trying to write down things like crazy, everything you hear without understanding, then that's not good either. So there has to be a balance between your note-taking and your understanding. So yes, totally. Okay, guys. Anything else? Any other question?
No.
Okay, guys. So before you go, we're gonna be doing this daily surveys. So every class will ask you 3 questions about the class. Please, if you don't mind answering them before you go. I would really appreciate it. And I'll be seeing you guys our next class.
See you next class, Leah. Thank you.
Bye bye, Miguel. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye, teacher. Goodbye.
Instructor. Have a good night.
Bye, teacher.
Bye bye.
Bye, teacher. Thank you.